Hi there, Elevated Planet community. This is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and today I'm with Sheila Seppi. Sheila, whose book I have read very recently. Hi there, Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic, thank you. I'm delighted you could put aside the time today because I got to say your book was exceptionally inspirational. But we have this thing called the Twiglet Zone, which is where I introduce to our mainstream folks out there some pretty fantastical kind of ideas. And the premise on which your book is based, which is called Walkins, the Cosmology of the Soul, I think to hear it from you, it adds an awful lot of validity to it. Because I've been talking about this kind of thing for a long time. I was a big fan of Dolores Cannon and all her work. And so I was familiar with the concept already, but I had never met anybody that actually has gone through that specific experience.
Well, and before we start, let me say if this had not happened to me, I would not believe it possible
Right.
because I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian family in the South, and we had very, very set, very firm belief systems. And something like a walk in did not exist within that conversation or that realm. And a walk in is when one soul leaves the body and another soul enters. So some people think it's similar to a near death experience, and I guess in a way that it is. But in my case, I had been a very, very, very sick person. And I had, over the course of years, been diagnosed with bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I had erythema nodosum and sarcoidosis, and I walked with a cane. And, you know, I couldn't play with my children. My youngest was 3, and so I would lay on the couch every day and he would play. I was starting to develop RA, and if it hadn't been for Celebrex, I would not have been able to open and close my hands. So needless to say, my health was in the toilet. And so I went to bed this way. And the very next morning, it felt like someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of my head, pulled me bolt right up in bed, and it was like lightning was running through my body. And then I was in white space. And I don't know how long I was in white space, but I was very comfortable. I was out of pain. I really don't think I was thinking about it at the time, but it was one of those places you just don't want to leave.
Mm.
I didn't see any scenery. I didn't see any people. It was just pure white space, but it was, you know, it was one of those experiences that you really just can't explain with words. It was full of unconditional love and compassion. And, it was just the ideal place to be. But then all of a sudden, my peripheral vision started coming back in, and then my frontal vision. And as I sat there, I'm looking around the room. It's like, what the heck am I doing sitting up in bed? But
Mm.
as I looked around the room, everything was the same and everything was different, except now my body was completely healed, which I discovered at my next doctor's visit, and to which they had absolutely no explanation, just like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle, yay. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, woohoo. And so I felt better. I had energy, I had clarity. If you hear that little noise in the background, this is my little Havanese Willow, who's with me all the time. He thinks he has to be at every interview. Sorry about that.
That's all
But
right. We don't mind.
anyway, I had clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentient, and I remembered what we would call past lives. I remembered how the universe was structured, and I remembered healing modalities that I'd never studied. And for somebody that had never read a metaphysical book in their life, this came as quite a shock to me, because all of a sudden I'm hearing voices and I'm seeing people and I'm having all of this visceral response when I'm around people and knowing things about them that quite honestly I didn't want to know. And all of this information was flooding through me, and I didn't have any explanation. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I had had a psychotic mental break, and that I learned very quickly that I couldn't talk about what happened to me. Within 3 months, I had left the marriage that I was in because it was already dysfunctional. I was dysfunctional. The marriage was dysfunctional. Everything was dysfunctional. But I had left that marriage within 3 months, and within another 3 months, I had found my first spiritual teacher. Now, I'd never had a spiritual teacher, wasn't looking for a spiritual teacher. I was looking for a counselor to give me a little blue pill because my
Mhm.
background was in psychology. And I thought I could go tell my story and she'd say, honey, yes, you've had a psychotic break, poor thing, and give me a prescription and life would be good. I would get back on with my life. But instead, that's not what happened. And she began to explain to me about walk-ins. And she was also of Hopi lineage. And because my background was in psychology, it felt really good for me to go and see her. And I had an automatic bonding with her. And I kept thinking, oh, it's just, we're both in the psychology field and, that type of thing.
Right.
But it was more than that. Everything she was telling me resonated true for me. And even though I didn't want to believe it and really couldn't believe it at first, I knew that it was true.
Yeah.
And so, over a period of months, I worked with her, and she invited me to attend what's called circles. And this was women's gatherings that got together, and she shared with us the teachings of the Hopi people.
Mm.
And she was of Hopi lineage. Learning those techniques, those modalities, learning about shamanism, learning how to travel in the upper world, the lower world, really is what helped to anchor me into
Mm.
this world.
Yeah.
Because even though I could tell somebody what happened, nobody could relate to me.
Mm.
I didn't have anyone to talk to, and it was there in these realms that I really met my spirit guides and my teachers. And they took me aside and they started explaining to me what I was experiencing, how it had occurred, and those types of things. And I stayed in kind of a state of shock for really a couple of years. I knew who I was, but it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around that.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while. And so when I did finally begin to accept it, everything in my life started to change and shift. And I met a new man and we married and we moved to Colorado. And by this time, I knew there was no way I could ever work in mainstream anything ever again.
Mm.
Because, if you're sitting there typing and all of a sudden your printer starts printing and you haven't hit print and you're like, people start looking at you stranger than they did before. And so it's like, okay, this is not going to work for me. And
Mm.
so I set up my own healing practice in Colorado. And during that time, during those first years, it was very, very slow. But it was a beautiful time and it was divinely orchestrated that way because it gave me more and more time to investigate this walk in phenomenon. And one day I was working with my guides, and to be honest, I was just like, hey, did I like snatch this body? Did I push this soul out? Did I cause harm? And they explained to me absolutely not, that before that soul had incarnated, there was a birth plan in place. And everybody has this, not just a walk-in, every single person, because there are certain, mm, for lack of better term, we have an agenda we want to meet. So we have our
Right.
goals and objectives, and we also put in place for ourselves exit timelines. And this was an exit strategy that soul, it had already learned everything it needed to learn, but
Mm.
it was tired and it was weary and it stayed past its comfort zone.
Mm.
Okay. And
Mm.
so when I don't know how deep you want me to go into this, but
I'll keep going.
let's just
Keep
say
going.
when I was on the other side,
Yes.
we can go into what that means later. But when I was on the other side, and we heard the soul of this body cry out to be released, it was decided that I would be the aspect that would come in. And so as I came in, that soul was propelled outward through my chest. Typically it goes out the head, but I came in, it went out the chest, and that is what had propelled me upright in the bed.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm thinking, all right, these guys know what they're talking about because that
Yeah.
really happened. And then the next thing that they told me was, so then I started asking, okay, so, if I came in, where did the soul go? And they explained again that on the other side, in a way, it's kind of like it is here. But
Mm,
on the other side, that's when we're really awake.
mm,
This is a planet of, as beautiful as it is, of false matrixing. Everything is actually a holograph in dense form, and there are, all I have to do is look around and I can see. I can see the pixels that make everything up, and I keep. I try not to do that because it can ruin a perfectly beautiful scarf, or it can ruin, it can ruin the painting on the walls. Like, come on, guys, but they showed me how on the other side we basically are projecting an aspect of ourself into human form to have this experience, and that it's not just this one experience. We can be having multiple experiences on this planet, on other planets, in other galaxies, other universes, etc., because the soul is so large. And then I said, okay, so um, now I'm confused. What do you mean we can be in more places at one time? Because
right.
I I had been raised that you live a good life, you die, you go to heaven, and you're there for eternity, whether you're eating chocolate or fishing, whatever it is that your passion's desire is. That's what you do. And then they said, well, it's really not that way. Now, when we pass, whatever we believe, like when I pass, no doubt Jesus or Mary will be there to greet me along with other family members because that's in my belief system.
Mm,
Okay. But if someone believes that there is nothing, they may go into a state of nothingness until they're like, wait a minute,
yeah.
this is not real. So whatever it is that we think, we have these opportunities for growth. And as a soul, that's what we're constantly doing. We're growing, we're experiencing, we're learning, and we choose those people that we want to have these experiences with. And when I understood that, there was an immediate forgiveness of the ex husband because
Right.
I thought somebody had sucked his brain out and put a demon in his body, which they could have, I don't know. But, it made me understand that he was one of my greatest teachers.
Mm,
And then there was that love and that compassion. And then I had to forgive myself for all the, ex-wife kind of thoughts that you can have.
right. Yeah.
Kind of things. And so once I learned, though, that he could have been my best friend on the other side, and the reality of it is we're all connected. We all have like our spirit families that we travel with. We have our good buddies that's in our spirit groups that we all travel with. And it takes us a long, long, long time to set these scenarios up
Mm,
for like a walk-in scenario to happen.
mm,
Now, this particular body had other souls lined up that at certain times they could come in.
right.
And the truth of the matter is, because the soul had missed the deadline and was kind of in between windows when they cried out. And this is not, if you're having a bad day, you can't say, oh, I beg for a walk in to come in.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. This is on your soul resonance, not your mind. This is the soul vibration that went up. And I, at the time, was in a collective of beings in our multidimensional selves, and we were working on the earth's crystalline grid. And so when this vibration went up, we were right here, and it made it easy for me to come in. Now, one of the things being, again, I don't know, if the listeners are going to start turning it off saying, okay, that lady's certified,
Yeah.
but here we go.
Keep
Here
going.
we go. So the previous soul to this body had been an Arcturian soul. And
Right.
so when that being came into this body, there was an energetic framework that had been in place. And when this soul left, that energetic framework was still in place that made it easy for me to slip into the body, because one of the multidimensional aspects that I had been and therefore had accumulated all of that knowledge and frequency had been an Arcturian. And
Right.
so, as sick as this body was, I was able to very gently enter into the body without frying the neurology or the biology. But over time, it was just a matter of seconds, though. When I came in, it was like bam, and the body was healed.
Mm.
But it didn't burn anything out, which is really, truly amazing. It just kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, when a walk-in comes into a body, they're getting a used car.
Yeah.
Okay. So I still had all of the thoughts. I still had all of the programming. I still had all of the sorry about that. I still had all of the behaviors and just the thought processes of the old soul,
Yeah.
because it had imprinted on this body. So when I came in, even though there was this miraculous healing, I still had a lot of the dysfunctional thoughts and a lot of this dysfunctional ways. And over time, I began to change those because they no longer served or resonated with the vibration of my soul. And so instead of drinking Diet Mountain Dew, which I thought was the nectar of the gods, I started drinking water. And
Mm.
instead of eating fast foods, I started cooking at home, and I started having salads and, all of those types of things. And so, everybody around me was really paying attention. It's like, oh, what's up with her? Because my behavior had changed so much, and because of those early days, then I was able to bring it forward. So in talking with my guides about that, during this same conversation, I was asking, okay, so what's up with all the behavioral changes? Why did that have to change? And they said because it was no longer in resonance with the vibration of the soul, and that it was no longer in resonance with the life path that I was going to have. And that when we made that shift, that's kind of like, hi, hello, how are you? Yep, we got an agreement, let's go. And it was really fast and furious. And my path, my mission is that of my collective that I came from, which is my multidimensional self. Um, and that collective is to be a way shower. And we still are here on the planet working in the crystalline grid, infusing it with love and light and compassion and frequencies that help in the planet to wake up and to be able to shift to this new paradigm, this new way of thinking, this new consciousness. And
Mm.
it makes it easier for me now, having gone through all those crazy years, and literally thinking I was crazy, to be able to talk with people as they're having their spiritual awakening, because they're like, I don't know what's happening. I'm hearing things. I don't believe in this. I went to bed and now I'm this way, or this happened. I had an automobile accident. And a lot of times what I find is people are walk-ins. But a lot of times what's happened is people are having their own spiritual awakening due to the fact that they've done all this personal work. They've done all the heavy stuff. I kind of got a, get out of jail free card with that one, because when I came in, I only had to clear the baggage that was imprinted into
Mm-hmm.
this body, and I hadn't accumulated. So now I just have my own 23 years worth of accumulated stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that I have to work through, which makes it a whole lot easier. But all of us have to go through these processes, whether we're a walk in or not. If we're going to shift the way that we think about things, if we want to move into a higher vibration, we have to let go of all that stuff that no longer serves us. And the reality of it is, one of the things that I saw from the other side is there's no shame or blame here. There
Right.
just is. And on the other side, everything is just an experience. So it doesn't matter if I choose to be a spiritual teacher or if I choose Well, in my case, it actually does. But most of the time with people, it doesn't matter the experience that they choose because they will be fulfilling their mission because they are already here. And sometimes that mission is to experience the bad just as much as it is to experience the good. Because many times we may have never had a lifetime on a planet full of duality, all this false matrixing, and have been able to have a joyful experience. I mean, how
Mm.
powerful is that? When we can come in and anchor into a body, a physical form, and all of this duality, all of these false teachings, all of these matrices of it's deception and everything that's around us, and yet we can come to a place of centeredness within ourselves and have a soulful experience at the same time we're having the human experience. I think that's pretty amazing.
Mm. It is. It's incredible. Now, one of the things that I'm always intrigued about, you're here along with many, many others on the planet to help with the evolution that is taking place on the planet, right? The
Correct.
raising of frequencies, the raising of consciousness. How how do you I mean, one of the things that always intrigues me is who knows what this is going to look like, right? How
Right.
much do we know? I mean, I keep hearing pictures of certain things and certain dates and various, but I've no idea is the truth of it. But I know things are changing, and I know things are changing for the better, even though we've got to go through some pretty, you would consider negative kind of aspects in order to get to the positive. How do you interpret this evolution?
Well, there's a couple different things I'd like to address. The first thing is, you know, I still have a practice, and people come to me all the time, and they're literally almost clinically depressed because of everything that's happening around them. And I try to always let people know the reason things appear to be so bad is because there's more light on the planet. And the more light that we have, the more darkness we're going to see. Because these are not new things. These are not new things. This planet has always been this way. It's just now that people are waking up and they're like, you know what? I don't accept that anymore. This kind of whatever influence is no longer good for me. It's no longer good for my family. We want good food. We want clean air. We want this, we want that. No longer are we going to back a war that we don't support. No longer are we this, no longer. And so people are really coming into a place of their own
Mm.
because of what's happening around. And with the pandemic, I know a lot of people were able to have time that they were able to drop in for the first time, maybe in their life.
Right, it's very
They
true.
had the spaciousness to reconnect with their family and reevaluate what's really important to me.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
where do I want to be? How do I want to evolve as a soul? Now, one of the things, as I said, I came from a multidimensional collective, meaning that at the point where I was, I had already gathered all my multidimensional aspects and I had merged with other beings who had done the exact same thing. We had done our work, we were ready to merge and move to a different density because we have dimensions, we have densities, etc. So we had moved into, I think we were, I think it's seventh density because we didn't have bodies. So in sixth density, you still have a form. Seventh density, you don't have a body. Well, this planet is a rock. This
Mm.
planet has growth on it. But the consciousness of this planet comes from a ninth density being named Gaia.
Mhm.
Gaia chose to put her consciousness into this planet to have the experiences that she's having. Now, Gaia's a lot older than 2,000 years. People have been here for longer than 2,000 years. My goodness, archaeology uncovers things all the time to prove that. However, people still do not understand that civilizations rise and they fall, They rise and they fall. Just because we don't have a book that tells us they did doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
And so this planet has many, many civilizations, many, like the most recent was that of Atlantis. And
Right.
then when Atlantis fell into the ocean, other land masses came back. And at one time, everyone lived on one mass called Pangea. Well, thank goodness now they at least teach that, school books, that
Right.
at one time this planet was just the one landmass. And so as Gaia has continued to evolve, her consciousness is also evolving to where she can move now into a 10th density
Wow.
being. And because her vibration is shifting, because her vibration is raising, and because humanity has this symbiotic relationship with Gaia, where that she vibrates at a 7.8 megahertz, guess what? Our body vibrates at a 7.8
Right.
megahertz. If Gaia starts vibrating at a 12, humanity vibrates at a 12, and we're all like, oh my God, what's going on? The energy is so crazy. When Gaia shifts her vibration, it affects humanity.
Mm.
And so, because she's going through this conscious awakening, so is humanity, because it's bumping up the evolution of the human body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in bumping up the evolution of the human body, that also frees up extra energy for the soul to also begin to shift and to change. People say, oh, but we're going to transform into our light bodies. Guess what? You're already in your light body. It's just covered by a meat suit.
Yeah.
Okay? So as this meat suit gets less dense, more light's able to shine through. And when Gaia makes her transition, those individuals that are in resonance with that particular frequency also will transcend with her.
Mm-hmm.
There may be other people who do not transcend with her, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
because this isn't a race. Everyone will get there eventually,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But they're going to have to wait another 26,000 year cycle before they can do that, and they can watch that. And if they study the yugas in the Hindu texts, they'll be able to easily find out all of the things that they predict happens during these yuga cycles is happening and has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
At 2012, there was this massive wave of energy that washed across the planet, and people are like, that Mayan calendar, there wasn't anything to it. Well, let me tell you, there most certainly was.
Yeah.
First off, for the Mayans, it's like, just the ending of the calendar. What they're looking for now are those 3 days of darkness that they talk about. But for humanity, what happened during that time, 100% of all of the beings on this planet shifted from a 3D consciousness into 4D consciousness. However, most people were not prepared for that, and therefore they still stuck into their 3D ways. And so you can look at this being 4D, and it's been this the entire time over the last several 20 years almost. Well, 20 years now, yes. Coming up on the 21st. And so it's been vacillating back and forth. People are able to attain higher thought processes of 5D, 6D, and then something happens and right back down the slide they go. And
Mm.
they're right back into the 3D and they start working their way up. But what's happening is now more and more people are awakening. And so as people move into the higher 4D and even into that lower 5D, they're able to lock into place because
Mm.
the vibration of the planet and the vibration of humanity is supporting that shift.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where we are right now. There are people that like a good friend of mine is a very unique form of an Arcturian that's here actually in the Arcturian form, and she has to have her meat suit redone periodically because it breaks down so much. She did not even enter into puberty till she was like 18 years old.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of abnormalities with her body, but that's because it's not human. But
Right.
anyway, the Arcturians are saying that there's a huge mass, just like what happened in 2012. There's these new photonic energies that are going to wash across the planet at the end of September, October, and then again at the end of the year. And that's exciting because now we're going to have two of them at once. So who knows what's going to happen? And then there's other timelines that go along with, we all have chakras that are located within the physical energy suit, and so the earth has chakras as well, and
Mhm.
those there are seals on top of the chakras of the body as well as on the earth, and all of the seals, all of the chakra seals have opened up, and the energy that was coming in, I think the last one was in the painted desert, the energy coming in was eighth and ninth dimensional frequencies, just feeding the planet, just ushering in this time. And then it gets in the crystalline core and it's like, whoosh, and it just goes throughout the whole planet as well as the crystalline grid of the earth. So it just travels. But that has recently shut down. And so now we're looking at all of these other chakra seals are beginning to shut down because the time of the individual flooding of the body for these dimensions are starting to come to an end. And it's predicted that in 2042 to 2047, the last seal will close. And isn't it interesting that they talk about seals, and even in the Bible and Revelations, they talk about the seals being reopened, and anyway, so but now they're on the process of closing down. And so when that happens, no longer are we going to be fed the energy to support this transition. And I think that's because we will have transcended. I hope. Who knows what it really means?
Mhm.
I'm not a fortune teller, thank
Mhm.
goodness.
I know.
But
I know.
you know, I get enough information as it is.
I know. But it is amazing. It's fascinating because I know like the Schumann resonance, which is that 7.8, has been
Yes.
oscillating a lot recently and increasing, and people can't understand why. After all these
Yes.
decades upon decades, as long as they've known it's existed, it's always been at the exact level, right? And
Right.
it's been changing. It's been going on a much bigger range. So
Right.
there you go. There's proof of what.
Oh, there is so much proof, and there's also proof that we have a human soul.
Oh,
Because now quantum science has been able to measure the plasma field within the body.
wow.
Okay. Now I can talk about the plasma and how I saw things come down and how we, anchor in as a body, or as a soul, but they can now measure that. And
Mm,
they also will measure that when a person exhales or inhales their last breath,
mm,
that there is an immediate loss of physical weight,
wow.
and there is also a shift and a depletion of the plasmic field.
Mm, yes.
And that's measurable. There are numbers out there. Scientists have proven that.
Mm,
And I knew it was just a matter of time. I mean, you know, the majority of the world believes that humanity has a soul, even though they've never seen it.
mm,
And it always, confounds me. It's like why people can't believe in the existence of extraterrestrials. Just because you've never seen them doesn't mean they're not real. And guess what? They're just like us. They
mm,
just live on a different planet, and therefore their physical form has to be a little bit different. But they have souls, they have families, they have kids, they cry, they
mm.
have emotions. They just live on other planets. And so, I for me, I will say extraterrestrials, they're not so crazy about the ET. I don't know why,
No,
but
I
they're not
understand that.
crazy about that. But galactic family they like, and they
Yeah,
embrace, and they show up and they support us. And guess what? A lot of the guardian angels that people think they have are actually extraterrestrials.
I've
There's
heard
no
that as well.
difference. There's no difference.
And
Absolutely no difference.
no, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all divine
The same.
expressions of consciousness in different
Exactly.
forms, right? So here
Exactly.
we have the meat suit of humanity. So here we are, but most of us in the Western world believe that we are the meat suit rather than the they're just occupying it for this particular lifetime, right? And that's
Right.
the kind of thing that's the starting blocks, if you like, to realize that we are a immortal spirit having a human experience rather
Exactly.
than this human meat suit living a life where you've got to be fearful because sometime you're going to die and you're going to disappear into nothing. Whereas reality, all we do is shift energy forms from human to whatever, onto one of the astral planes, to a higher astral plane or something.
Exactly.
But again, each of those, like the galactic family, let's call them then, if you're out there, 100 light years away, on say Sirius A, for instance, and you're out there, and you could be that having a six dimensional consciousness, if you like, as one of those beings on Sirius, right? And
Absolutely.
it's the same kind of electromagnetic life force that just fires up a different body. And that's
Yes.
my understanding of it. So, that's why we will have been extraterrestrials in the past. That's why we will have been different earth elements. It could have been fire, air, water, rocks,
Exactly.
plants. And it's fantastic when you stop and think about this. And it's not something to be fearful of. I think the biggest leap of faith is that it means that your version of reality has to change entirely from the standard westernized, narrow, programmed version into
Yes.
something far more expansive. And it is a big leap of faith for many people. I mean, I was 58 before I even started on this journey, you know?
Mm.
And so I associate very strongly with the mainstream because that's where I've lived a vast majority of my life. So I totally respect people's struggle to get
Yes.
over these concepts because it's a massive shift. And I had my epiphany when I went for my first reading, and I realized the afterlife was real, and I was left with no place to go but to realize it was. And then the question was, okay, well, if I was wrong about that, how wrong was I? And that began this journey to discover the fact I was massively wrong, and actually it's way better
Yes.
than I'd ever could have even dreamed. And it just gives you a completely different outlook on life. Your fear drops away, and you can kind of love life, and you can love the people around you, and you can. That's the beauty of it, you know.
I know when there was recent talk about nuclear war, and they're like, oh, I'm like, but what's the downside? I mean, other than really messing up Gaia, what's the downside? We all get to
Yeah.
take a trip at the same time. I mean, come on. It's to me, because I guess I'd been there and done that. There is my memory of, even because there was still this attachment, the soul had not firmly disengaged as it was going out of the body, and I hadn't firmly engaged. So that momentary period where I was still engaged with both souls
Mm,
was phenomenal, because the one soul that was leaving, it was almost like shaking off, like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Kind of energy. It's like, it is the most joyful, freeing, liberating experience. And
mm,
people worry about, the pain of the physical body. But I'm going to tell you, the reality of it is the soul steps out long before
mm.
that. We have
Yeah.
no desire to hang out for that stuff.
No.
People worry about, car accidents. Did people suffer? Well, you know what? The body was going through a shutdown phase. We're not there.
No.
The consciousness is not there.
Mm,
That's just a shell, nothing
mm,
more.
mm,
It's like if you have an Easter egg and you put candy in the middle, well, when you take the candy out, that's us. You've got the shell. The
mm,
shell would go through a process of, oh, yeah, it needs to continue to break down or whatever it does, but that's it. There's
mm.
no feeling, no emotion, there's nothing. And we don't need to be afraid of that. It's a joyous time and
Yeah.
so much energy. And then it was like, oh wow. And literally some people are just like the adrenaline junkies here on earth. That's like, okay, I want to go back. That was so fun. And I want to go back. So they run to get back in the line, kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is this is a very unique experience that we get to have. Now, when you look at the extraterrestrial races, they know that they're souls, and they know that whatever their body is literally their car to get them around. And like I said earlier with the analogy of the used car, I had to come in and get a new paint job and switch out the interior and put new, wiring in and that kind of thing. But with extraterrestrials, they don't do that. They just simply decide they're going to switch forms, and they do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's the way it is on the other side. But here we have this opportunity to come to learn, to experience. This is kind of like, adrenaline junkie school for those on a fast track.
Yeah.
So
No.
everybody out there listening, give yourself a pat on the back. You've made it this
Right.
far.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I've again, you hear this through Dolores's work over the years as well, was about the fact that Earth School is one of the most challenging places to go
Oh,
anywhere, right?
it
And
is.
because it's the forgetting. Okay, the fact is, as you say, if you've got all your past memories of the millions of years you've been around doing different things, then that's one thing because you can accept the bigger reality. But here, we that part of the deal is that we forget everything that we knew, right?
Yeah.
And therefore we are subject to this very specific programming that we then get bombarded with to tell us actually we're only this big, stay in this box, be afraid, be fearful, whether it's division energy or fear of illness and all the rest of it. Why not focus on the stuff that makes you happy? Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I was working with my guides and kind of having that question answer sort of session, um they gave me so much information, and it fed in with the information that I came in with that I still didn't have a language for. And when I was writing the book Walk-ins, Cosmology of the Soul, I had like a whole chapter trying to put it all down, and
Mm,
my editor is like, "What this?" Because I was trying to get it out on the paper, and it just didn't make sense yet.
mm,
And now I don't know what happened, but and it's so simplistic now
mm,
for me to look at it. They've given me different languaging because I am not a quantum physicist. I never will be. And that's not what I'm here to do.
mm,
I'm here to kind of translate the things that I see to help people understand
mm,
what's going on out there. And when Source decided that it wanted to experience itself, okay, there was, this the sound that began to come out, and that's the Om. A lot of people call it the first word. There's a lot of indigenous
mm,
societies that all of their creation stories go back to the first sound. But when that first sound occurred, then there was light, and then you had the light and the sound, and they had vibrational frequency. So then you had frequencies,
mm,
and they began to move in a certain pattern, and then you had the vibrations, and then they began to oscillate off and on, with their frequencies, and they began to get closer to closer, and they began to form this fabric, which I consider the plasma of all things,
mm,
which is actually the void, which is actually the etheric body of Source.
mm,
Okay, simple, right? Okay, and as it starts to go out within that, then there's kind of like layers, and go from one layer, you go out to the next, and all it is vibration and the way that things go together. But then there's what's called these templates, and these templates are literally for everything. Every thought that Source God has is in a template
mm,
to be experienced or expressed. And so there is within one of those templates is a blueprint for life forms, humanity, hominid species.
mm,
And so we are within that template, but also within that template is what's called the Oversoul template. And as that Oversoul template begins to expand out, you have what's called a master template of the oversouls. And that's kind of like the big boss. It's like, oh, we got to change this next time around. Let's do a little morphic resonance over here, housekeeping, get some things going. So we've got this master, we got the big boss,
mm,
oversoul. And then as that comes down, depending on like we'll use this universe because there are many, many universes, but let's use this universe for an example. Then there's an oversoul for that, for the universe. And then this oversoul answers to the master oversoul. Well, then within this universe, we also have galaxies. And we have constellations, and each of those have oversouls, and each of the planets have oversouls. And at the last number I read, there was something, I don't even know what this number means, but 70 quintillion. What is that? I mean, how many? That's how many planets.
Right.
That's just in our Milky Way galaxy here. 70 quintillion. How do they know that? And each one of those has an oversoul. So now you're looking at the oversoul of Gaia. And within that, let's say there's like 12 modules. There's like learning pots, okay? So, and we want to go through all 12 of those. One of them could be compassion. One could be death, grief, dying, pain, misery. One could be, whatever, unconditional love, forgiveness. And we go through all of those and experience those within what I call our individual oversoul. Okay. Now, when my guides were talking to me about this, they didn't go into the 70 quintillion. They just said this is the way it is. When they told me, they said, and your individual oversoul is different, and it's called the Shantias Khan. And within the Shantias Khan holds all of your memories, all of your experiences. It's kind of like your personal cloud storage. It's your Akasha record. It has everything in there. And then when you decide that you are going to incarnate, then just a little piece of that begins to come down, and it's like this swirling motion. Really, it's light, sound, frequency patterns, but it looks as if it swirls. And that's what people refer to as their higher self, because that's the aspect that's still attached. It's kind of like our umbilical cord. Okay. Right. And so then that drops down. And as all of this energy is occurring, then once it locks into a human form, that's called the soul, and that's the personality of the lifetime. And the spirit aspect is there as well. The spirit is that enlivenment. Okay. So it is the actions that the soul is going to take. Okay. And so they all have a different name, which worked really well for me, because I'm like, can you draw me a diagram? Can you put that in, multiple colors in a chart, for me? But they did. They allowed me to be able to draw that, and, to where it made sense to me. And so when I wrote the book, I tried to put that little diagram in there, because I really want people to know that, there is no fear in death, and we take multiple forms. And just imagine, with inside that Shantias Khan, there is multiple yous having multiple lifetimes.
Right.
Now, so before I incarnated, my Shantias Khan had merged with many other Shantias Khans into that seventh density form. And then we were actually out in the Andromedan system working. And I knew that, but I never really knew why. And I had past life hypnosis session done. And honestly, we were kind of like out, now here I am. I'm thinking, ooh, we must have been doing something great. We're getting ready to create a universe. Oh, how cool. Yeah. Nah, we were scouts. We were scouts. We were out way in the Andromedan system, because there was this mass of black energy that was on the peripheral borders. And then we saw a huge ship come, and it projected like these energy beams that surrounded this mass. And it was like, and the thing just kept shrinking. It gave it pulses. So it just kept shrinking until it dissipated. Well, come to find out, that was AI technology.
Wow.
The AI had taken on a form, and it had come in through kind of there's all kinds of gateways, but there's also some fissions that are out there, and it had kind of slid in undetected in one of those. And so that's what we were observing, but all was well because it had been taken care of. But we heard during that observation period, there was this cry or vibration that came up from Gaia, and she needed support. And it's really cool because Dolores Cannon talks about that in her books, The Waves of
Mm,
Volunteers. And we
that's right.
came in what we would call in the it was about 1980, somewhere around there in the 80s, and we were working on the crystalline grid. And
Mm,
so this aspect that then came in was just that little tiny drip
mm,
of this overall collective merging of beings that I was. So if this soul had been maybe Andromedan, a different aspect would have come in than what came in here. And so that's kind of how I got to be here.
mm.
Um, and it took me a long time. Even so, now I'm a walk-in. I was doing what? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm just a little drip, kind of thing. Like, crush the old ego here, buddy. But my guides, when they told me and they began to explain the massiveness, and, as I went out and started talking to people about this, they're like, oh, well, then I guess you don't even think there's a God. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you know how massive source energy is? Do you
Mm,
even have an understanding?
mm,
Look around, everything is source.
mm. Yeah,
There
including
is
us.
no separation. We are a fractalized aspect. Our
Mm,
Shantias Khan is the larger aspect. The soul is a smaller aspect. We merge back with that larger aspect, and the entire existence of who and what we ever are
mm.
is our making our way back to reuniting with that source energy, only to be spit back out on the other side. So, and then we become something else again.
I know. And one of the things that I think is very important for people to kind of take on board, and again, they might dismiss this at this stage, but it's the understanding that like for me, for instance, I'm not just like John Drew the meat bag, right?
Right.
I've got a team. There's a team, and this is amazing. And I love this idea that I've got Team John Drew because I'm not the cells anyway. But the cells are part of me, and that's miraculous, and I love that. But the guides, the angels, the higher self, the whole lot, master, ascended masters, whatever, they're all here to help you. But you got to know they're there, and you got to ask, right?
Yes.
You've got to ask. So many people just go through life not even realizing that you have an opportunity to tap into this enormous wisdom.
I tell people all the time, I am the laziest person you'll ever meet. And they're like, but you constantly are getting stuff accomplished. Just like, I just let my guides do it.
Right.
All you have to do is ask.
Mm,
And remember earlier, I said things are very much the same as they are here on the other side. And if you're not utilizing your guides, they're not getting the opportunity to
mm,
do their job.
right.
And when I realized that, I was like, oh,
Mm,
okay. So then it makes life very easy
doesn't
because
it?
you're constantly getting guidance. You're constantly, being able to be led down different pathways, just because they're there to support you.
Yeah. And it is one of the most difficult things to appreciate. I mean, I lived a very left brain existence for my first 58 years. It was all numbers, it was finance and all this kind of stuff. And I loved it. I enjoyed that. But the fact is that one of the books that helped to wake me up in the early stages was Brian Weiss, who's the
Hmm.
it's
Many lives, many
Many
masters.
Lives, Many Masters. That was the first book, and it was actually a quote from Many Lives, Many Masters. I still have it here in front of me, which is when one of the ladies had passed over, and the question that was asked was, "What did you have to learn from that life?" And the answer was, "I had to learn that I had no control over life. I must have faith in the masters. They will guide me throughout." And that always stuck with me because I thought, how fantastic is that? Because actually it takes the weight off. If you understand that you have this massive spiritual infrastructure all supporting this 50 trillion cells, which and obviously the electromagnetic energy, there is that aspect, you know,
Mm.
isn't that amazing? But
It
so
is.
many people are blind to that. I was blind to it for 58 years. And yet, to me, that just means that I feel the joy even more now because of the years of blindness. I don't take it for granted. I just kind of love the fact that I have some glimpse of one. I even now, I know that I only understand the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a visceral experience for me working with the guides and kind of going back and getting a little taste. And one of the things I keep asking them is like, why am I not remembering my dreams? Give me a break. Everybody around me is remembering their dreams. I can't remember my dreams. What's up with this? And they're like, you know what? If you remembered what you were doing at night, you would be so homesick, you would not even return to your body.
Mm,
And you have a veil in place for a reason. And
mm,
I'm like, oh, okay, you know. And so people that come to me and they're like, I can't remember my dreams. I can't remember. I mean, I can remember dreams sometimes, but it's
right.
not like, you know, a lot of my friends have like really active dream lives and they're doing this and doing that. And it's wonderful. And it's not like that I'm comparing myself to them. It's just I would like to have those types of dreams too.
Mm,
And my guys are like, no,
yeah.
no. And then when I started astral traveling consciously, you're not going to believe the first place that I went was that the dome in Seattle.
Oh,
The Seattle, yeah, and I had my arm out, and there were people I could see them eating lunch and different things, and my hand was out, and I was touching the window. I was going like, whee! And it's like, you know what? There is probably a reason I don't remember my dreams. If I am that silly and weird that it's like I wanted to go to a planet. Come on.
yeah.
No, I went to Seattle to that needle. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
No
so
problem.
on the other side, what we experience has nothing to do with what we think we want here.
Mm,
You know, these
yeah.
are all human projections. Like the human of me wanted to go visit, someplace exotic. Well, the reality is I probably do that stuff at night. And in truth, I just wanted to go to Seattle, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we just don't know, but our guides and our teachers, everyone's just there ready to support us at any time. All we have to do is ask, and we have to remember too, we are never ever ever alone. It is
Mm,
impossible to be alone. We are all one.
yes. Yes. And that's, to me, that is a really important statement because, that's the point at which you realize that when you have division energy and this politicians and the likes trying to convince you that we should be afraid of certain countries or, let's say, for instance, they decide to start talking a little bit more about extraterrestrials, but talk about it from a threat perspective as opposed to the fact that they're a galactic family and starting to say, actually, we don't understand this. And by the way, we think they're a threat to national security. And it's coming, you know.
Right.
But the fact is that whether you're one of our galactic cousins or whether you're, from any nationality in the world, or indeed, a different life form, we are all part of the same thing. And,
Right.
so when you hate on somebody or something,
Mm,
you're kind of doing it on yourself.
absolutely. Yeah,
So,
it's just, I always tell people if you will take a crystal that's faceted and you hold it up to the light, that's like source, and each one of us is one of those facets in
mm,
that crystal. We may be expressing on the left wall and someone else may be expressing on the right wall, but we still are that crystal. And
mm,
that's the way we are as souls. And
mm,
even on the other side, we are projecting an aspect of ourselves right now to
mm,
have this experience.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the points that you've said a couple of times as well, which I do love this because I've done a few different articles and a couple of videos on this as well. I call the series the Dead Happy series, which is
Hmm.
trying to get across to people that, and it's, grief is a natural part of life. When we lose somebody we love, it's not wrong to grieve. And it's not sort of like trying to say, yeah, you don't need to worry about it. It's all fine. Because naturally,
Right.
once we lose somebody that we're close to, we will grieve. It is part of the human condition. But
Yes.
notwithstanding that, you don't need to worry about them or what they've gone through, because they're in a beautiful place. They're in this amazing place. And you know, we have to think of death more as a transcendence, a beautiful transcendence, rather than, you know, some horrific end of an existence, which again, I think too many people, and that's what promotes fear. You know, when people are fearful of that change and losing their life, you never lose your life. You can't lose your life. It's impossible.
Right.
So dead
It's
happy, yeah.
absolutely true.
That's you know, it's I'll keep banging that particular drum. Now, you know, one of the things that really intrigues me, and I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I just want to ask about, you know, the shamanic side of things. I know that you are heavily involved with that, obviously, with Jeremy, right? Who is your Hopi guide through life, and I love that, because to me, the Native American wisdom from so many of the past, and I think this is one of the things that I've realized over these last few years, is that how much wisdom we have lost that we used to
Yes.
have. And we would look down on indigenous people of the past and say, oh yeah, they knew nothing, they were worshiping this, that, and the other. Actually, you know what, they knew an awful lot more, and they lived in
Right.
harmony with the land, right? They didn't own the land, they were just part of the land. It was just like this beautiful wisdom that needs to be celebrated. But the shamanic traveling to the upper mid worlds, the middle world, the lower world, you know, I that's fascinated me, and I you know, read some of Sandra Ingerman's work and the likes, and she's very good. But you know, whenever I've tried to do the traveling and things, you know, you talk about having a veil. I kind of have a veil. I I want to break through. Right? It's almost like I want it too much, and I I want to do the astral stuff. I want to do all that. I struggle with it. It's like there's a veil somewhere that prevents me, even though it doesn't mean that I doubt it in any way, shape, or form, because I have no doubt.
Okay, so you work with your guides, correct?
Hmm.
Okay. So I want you to think about a place right now that you know of that has like a hole in the ground, a hole in the tree, some place that you have physically seen with your eyes.
Hmm.
Okay?
Right.
So when you begin to do this journey into the lower world, you know, you want to have, I always have, I drum for myself, but you can also listen to music, and you want to make sure that there's a very methodical rhythm, because that is the heartbeat of Mother Earth that brings us into that balanced state. And think about that whole. And I
Mm-hmm.
usually take people, you know, let's just see what the hole feels like. Is it cold? Is it wet? You know, and we just feel that. And then it's like, imagine that you're just the size of a little ant.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're marching into that hole, but that ant is you. What does it look like now? And then look around, and your guides are there with you, right? Yep, my guides are there. Great. Let's go in the hole just a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. And then up ahead, there's a light. So let's kind of go up to that light and just kind of peek out and see. Don't step out into it, just kind of just peek out and
Mm-hmm.
see what that is, because you want to be safe. You don't want to be stepped on by an elephant because you're just this little bitty ant. And then you start looking around and you see what it is, and you walk out, and then your energy brings you back up to your form, and ask your guides to take you where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna
And
try it.
the lower world is very, very akin to this world, except if you step out on, let's say you're walking on the grass, you might hear, excuse me, you're walking on me. There's a path over there. So things can be very animated. This
Mm-hmm.
is also where you might have an experience with a departed loved one, or you might also run into people that you have known in this lifetime. But it's also a place that some of your guides may be as well. And you always want to take a guide in with you, because depending on whether it's the lower astral or the upper astral where you're traveling, you can also run into disincarnate spirits that are
Right.
not very happy,
Mm.
and they don't realize that they have passed, and
Mm.
they may not have had a concept of what the other side is, or they had an automobile accident and they were projected out,
Mm.
um, and but they weren't ready to go
Mm.
yet. You know, there was a timeline, but they weren't ready to go,
Mm.
and so they're still kind of attached to this physical world. And so as you walk around, you always want to go with your guides, but
Mm.
there are so many beautiful things that you can see and experience, and cities. Now when you go into the upper world, that's very, very etheric, and most of the time people will say, "Oh, I ran into Jesus." Not Jesus incarnated. Sorry, you're not in the upper world. What happens is the lower worlds, you can go deep enough into the lower world that you actually start to come up in the lower aspects of the upper world,
Mm.
because everything is a cycle, everything is a circle. And so you can travel deep enough in that you start to come out. So if you run into Jesus, 9 times out of 10, you're still in the lower world. The lower world is not hell or Hades or
Mm.
anything remotely associated to that. That's just the way that the indigenous people differentiated these time space locations. And
Mm.
so if you're in the upper world, you're going to run into beings that have never incarnated. You're going to run in maybe to your spiritual teachers. You may even run into an aspect of you that has never incarnated. It's very etheric, very crystalline, very beautiful. The colors, they're, the closest thing we have are like pastel, high vibrating pastel colors. I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Mm.
Um, and there's so much you can learn, so much. But the biggest thing is we have to learn how to get out of our headspace,
Mm.
because we want to project ourselves there. Let's just, because that's natural. Remember,
Mm.
we're already projecting ourselves into this body. So if we want to go to another realm, we want to project ourselves, but we just have to release that and let it go, and just drop in, like I said, like an ant. You could go into a cave, you could, however, whatever that entrance is into this planet,
Mm.
because Gaia will then make sure that you get through and to the other side.
Mm. Excellent. Wow. Wow. So one final question for you, Sheila. It's the Aborigines regarded this as dream time, and outside of that was reality. Would you see things that way?
110% yes, it is. Because remember, I started earlier, just like sometimes when you have an old television and you can see the pixels in the
Mm.
television, that's what I see out here. Everything is a pixelization. And it is a beautiful holographic projection. However, none of this is real.
Yeah.
If we could unleash our minds, we could stick our hand right through this table.
Right.
I could. I went through a phase a couple of months ago, and I would just put my hand up to the wall because I know I can walk through that wall. I know I can walk through that because I'd been walking through walls, I guess, in dream time. I don't know
Right.
why, but
Right.
and my friends like, "Sheila,
Yeah.
you can't walk through the wall." I'm like, "Yes, I can. I know. I just need to raise my vibration. I'm just not
Right.
doing it right."
Yeah.
But yeah, everything around us is just a holographic projection, but we chose to be in
Yes.
this 3D density.
Yes.
Now, when we're in first density, we're gas, we're bacteria, we're,
Mm.
those types of things. Second density, we get into the animals and the plants and the trees. Well, we're in third density, we're humanity. We
Mhm.
have time, space. We can pick this bottle up and it has form, it has shape. When you move into 4D, I can walk through that wall.
Uh, there you go.
We might still be able to see it, but I can walk through that wall because we're partially human, partially etheric. And the
Right.
reason for that being is we are closer and closer to our true state, which
Mm.
is on the other side. And we
Mm.
can do all of that stuff there. All
Mm.
of it we can do.
Mm.
But here we're asleep, really,
Mm.
truly. This is, we're just playing, we're pretending. It's like, what's it like? What's
mm,
it like for, oh, I think I'm going to be a walk-in. Yeah, nah, I don't want to be born. Hey, let's just go in at this age. Yep, and that'll help you get this job done. Okay, yeah, let's do that.
mm,
Things are very simplistic on the other side. They
mm,
really are. There's none of the judgments or the betrayals or the belittlements. There's none of that. And
mm.
it is on your very best day here, amplify that to that 70 quadrillion billion or whatever that number
Right.
was,
Yeah.
you know, just to amplify that.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, this is
Incredible.
definitely a dream time.
Yes. And I love it because he just,
Me too.
as I say, it takes the pressure away. This is just an experience. You might as
Yeah,
well enjoy it. We have a choice, you know?
yes,
We can celebrate life. We don't have to fear it.
right.
That's part of the joy. And that's what we're trying to do with Elevated Planet is just sort of like bringing that sense of celebration back into life again so that we can all join the journey together as a community, and then we get community consciousness, and then that gives you a multiple effect in
Beautiful.
terms of the joy of it all. And that's it. That's the plan. But
I
Sheila,
love it.
I've got to say a massive thank you to you. This has been mind blowing. You know, it follows so much of the stuff that I've talked about in the past, but it's so, you know all the stuff I could talk around the periphery of it, and yet you can give us absolute detail on this, and I'm just so grateful. And you know,
Thanks for having me. And, I do want people to know that if this hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed it. And so if people are out there and are kind of like, yeah, I think she's just blowing some hot air, well, just know I can only share my experience. I was just saying, it's just my experience, and everything my guides have shown me is the way to help me as the Sheila brain in this body to be able to understand and to grasp those things that I saw and experienced and still experience and know to be true.
mm,
I know everything I said. I know that I know that I know that I know and have experienced beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I hope people find something that I say to be uplifting to them, or that it helps them along their journey, because truly we are all just one. We are having this human experience together, and we've all agreed here to be here at this particular point in time in the history of not just humanity, but also with Gaia
mm.
herself.
Right, right, fantastic. Yeah. So, I would recommend to anybody who has a degree of curiosity around this to purchase Walk-ins, The Cosmology of the Soul. It's a piece of genius, and
Oh,
that's kind of like I've read a lot of good stuff in recent times, and including Dolores and some of Miguel's work and all the rest of it. But this was really adding a new layer of understanding for me. So Sheila, and it's been such an eye-opening experience having this conversation today as well.
thank you.
Thank you, thank you, and thank you also to our Elevated Planet community for joining us in this video. And Sheila, I hope we can touch base again at some time in the not too distant future, and you can bless us again with some more of your wisdom.
Sounds fun. Love to do it.